Yeah, dude, the short answer is God. How do we actually put ourselves in a position to achieve financial freedom and independence? I'm a ranger, I'm a jump master, I got all the battle stat, I got all the things, like there's no, my NCOERs are like, do cream of the crop, like there's no freaking, what are you talking about? So most people leave a legacy of debt. It's like if your money is growing for you, you are paying for something. So what are you paying for and how much are you paying? Like leave wherever it is you went to high school. Like go grow up and experience the world. That's a cheat code, success. Let's leave a legacy of debt or work until we die. It's like, hey, how do we actually establish generational wealth? And so my sister gets arrested by federal agents and I'm like, hey, I should work. The two biggest factors as far as wealth generation is concerned, so it's essential that we understand when are we paying taxes and what are we paying taxes. A lot of people think like if you're just working with Charles Schwab, it's the same as working with an Edward Jones. Or if you're working with Merrill Lynch, it's the same as working with an Allstate rep or whatever it may be. How do we actually solve this problem and fix the broken backbone of this country? We got to understand how money grows and how we're taxed on that growth. Like these are essential components. And here's the other thing. There have never been market circumstances in the history of this country under which that statement is an accurate statement. I know a whole lot more people who lost a lot of money than I know who actually gained a lot of money. Make sure that you're not living, in a version of yourself that isn't conducive with the version that you want to become. Well, it's always funny because it's always like, where do I start? Like with an introduction. And I guess, with that being said, my name's Nathan Wheeler. And right now I'm in financial services and it's crazy because I never imagined I could have given you a million scenarios of like what I'd be doing and not one of them would have ever been financial services, like period. There's no way that like prior to 5 years ago would I have ever imagined me in this space. But I love it. And I found what I'm passionate about and very genuinely so. Like I appreciate the things that I do, the things that I'm learning, the things that I share with others, and how do we actually strategize wealth? Because when you look around and look at the landscape of wealth in this country, people are suffering. The vast majority of people in this country are suffering. Like the average 401k right now for a 65-year-old looking to retire has about $270,000 in it. And nobody can retire with that amount of money. When you look at the total debt for our country, it's like $36 trillion. When you look at the total debt to GDP ratio, it's like negative 135%. Like when you look at the statistics as what finance in this country looks like, it's devastating. And we have like 80 years of life to leave something better than what we got it at, and most people don't. Most people leave a legacy of debt. Most people leave a legacy of sorrow, to be quite frank. And so it's like, yeah, dude, I appreciate what I do because a lot of what I'm doing in educating people is shifting that. We are changing that and going from like, hey, let's leave a legacy of debt or work until we die. It's like, hey, how do we actually establish generational wealth? How do we put ourselves in a position to leave something greater for our posterity? How do we actually change the legacy that we leave behind rather than just coasting along to the end? How do we actually put ourselves in a position to retire and live comfortably? How do we actually put ourselves in a position to achieve financial freedom and independence? Because like that's the goal for most people. And it's not even like the money that's the goal. It's like, hey, I just want to be free. I don't want to live my entire life at the whims of another man.
Yeah.
So it's like learning how to accomplish that has been my passion. Like learning how to help other people, educating people on how to see that accomplished, that has become my passion because even me, I never imagined, like I said, it's not just the position of being in financial services and a financial professional, but it's also like where I'm at in life, the time freedom I have, the financial ability that I have to do the things that I want. Like I'm actually living a life that I want to live on my own terms rather than building out somebody else's dream. And so it's awesome and I love it. And that may be a little bit more of an intro than what you might have been looking for, but yeah,
No, that's good. I mean, it just shows that you're passionate about what you do. So to kind of start from the beginning, where are you from? I know that you're an Army veteran, obviously. You talk about like where you're from, what led you to walk into that recruiter's office and join the Army.
Yo, man, I wasn't expecting this, but let's talk about it. So, because I don't dive back deep, you know what I mean? But like, let's talk about it for a little bit. I always said I would never join the Army. So I was born in North Carolina, right? And even with this, it's hard for me because I don't know how deep I want to dive in this conversation. But like, it's hard for me not to just be like, hey, here it is. Like, here's all the things. So, but I'll try to trim it down a little bit. But I was born in North Carolina. My father was in the military. He did 2 years in the 82nd. So I don't really consider like he wasn't in the army. So sorry for everybody that did 2 or less years in the military. We appreciate those couple of years, but you know what I mean? And so he did a couple of years in. My parents, they got divorced when I was like one or something like that. Like, I don't remember. And so we moved down to Louisiana. And there was a lot of conflict between my parents. Again, I don't want to die like on this podcast. I don't want to dive into the trauma that was experienced there, but there was a lot of things going on. My father wasn't the best of dudes. And so we ended up leaving Louisiana to kind of get away from, even further away from him. And we moved out to Arizona. Same thing. He kind of came and there was more trauma. There was more things going on. And then we moved to the Midwest. And that was kind of like, for the longest time, I considered Arizona home. But there was a lot that shaped who I am that happened in the Midwest and like Illinois, Wisconsin, to some degree, right? Like there was a lot of things that were going on in this time. And it's crazy like thinking about it because I don't. But it was about that time that we moved to the Midwest that my father died, right? He committed suicide primarily because we left and we were out of reach. You know what I mean? What I imagine, right? I don't want to dive too far deep into that, but that was like a shift for a lot of for me and my brother and sister, and we had two younger brothers and sisters from my stepdad and my mom, and so it was an interesting dynamic that was happening, and we left Champaign, Illinois, and went to Kenosha, Wisconsin, and my brother he stayed in Kenosha, or he stayed in Champaign. I beg your pardon. When we all moved up for a little bit. And this is deeper than what you asked, but whatever. Like I said, I'm going to ride the train. And so this time period was pivotal, right? Because like my brother, he was like, it's hard to explain our relationship, but when he stayed back and I moved on, it was like, hey, now I'm finally developing some autonomy. Like now I'm starting to actually create my own friendships outside of that which we had, formed together. And I'm actually learning like, who am I? And so like, throughout all of this time, though, I'm like, hey, I'm never going to join the Army. Like, period, point blank, hands down. I don't want to be anything like my father. He's not a good man. I'm never going to join the Army because I correlated that to him. You know what I mean? And so we're in Kenosha. Kenosha didn't become famous till like 2020 or something like that when they started burning it down. And now everybody cared about Kenosha. And it was savage because I remember watching some of those things, talking to my people who were up there still. And I'm like, yo, like I know all those places. And what's crazy, side note about that is like, I was talking to everybody, they're like, yeah, dude, the people who were tearing it down and burning it up, like they weren't even from here. Like, so that was a weird time, but like, that's where I went to school. That's where I went to high school. You know what I'm saying? And, it was like 2005. 2005. I'm 17. I had been legally emancipated. I left home as a child at about 14. I went back and forth a little bit. The police brought me back home. I'd leave again. Like there was a whole thing until I was legally emancipated at 16. And then at 17, like I'm doing my thing, whatever. And I had like, it's kind of crazy, but again, I'm just going to tell it like it is. And so I went to work one day and I had like this excruciating headache. I felt terrible. I wasn't good. My boss brought me back to where I was living and I went to sleep. I usually can sleep things off, wake up, feel better, woke up, felt terrible. And I knew I needed to go to the hospital. And so I was on a program called Independent Living because while I was legally emancipated, there was still oversight that was necessary according to the state of Wisconsin. And so I went to like the office and I was like, hey, I need to go to the hospital. I don't know. I mean, I was a kid. I didn't know anything about what am I supposed to do other than just go to the hospital? And they were like, hey, like call your mom, get the insurance information. And I already thought at the time, I was like, what do you mean call my mom? Like, I'm already like, what are you talking about? Like, that's done. That's over and done with. And so anyway, I call her up. I'm needing to get the insurance information. She's like, hey, your brother is going to have a friend that's coming out here. They had already moved a few hours away. We're going to pick up this kid. He's going to come hang out with your brother. Why don't you just come with him? We'll pick you up. We'll take you to the hospital. So I go to the hospital, and you're probably like, what does this have to do with any of this? It does. It has everything to do with this, right? And so I get there. We go to the hospital, and it turns out it was like an infected wisdom tooth or something like that. And so I had to go through surgery, get it out. My mom scheduled a meeting with a recruiter, and it was a flight warrant. And I didn't know that at the time. Like, you know what I mean? I know now, like looking back, dude. But this warrant officer, this dude comes to my house. I'm like, yeah, dude, no, I'm not joining the military. Like, I'm not. It's not happening. No way. I appreciate you coming in here and wasting your time, but no, dog, it's not. It's not something that's happening. And I'm on like 400 milligram Vicodin. Like, there's like these things going on, and like, I don't remember exactly how it all happened, but like, I took the ASVAB, and like, yeah, like, I don't remember like the whole like because it was a wild and crazy time, and like I said, I was on drugs, literally for surgery, not like you know what I mean, not hard stuff, right? And so, and I left, and I went back to where I was living in Kenosha, and I remember I went to school to talk to the principal. I was at Ruther. It was at Ruther High School, like the one that was like graffiti, like that we saw during the riots. It was that school. And I remember I went in there and I was talking to the principal. He's like, hey, we can't start you this year because you're already enrolled in a school out in, it was like Milton, I think it was called, Milton, Wisconsin, whatever. It was like right outside of a town called Janesville, which is where my parents were living. And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't enroll in any school. Apparently my mom had enrolled me in a school, right? Because when I went out there and she saw me and like, whatever, I was talking to her and stuff, because I expressed to her, I was like, I got to get out of Kenosha. And yes, anybody from Kenosha, if you're anybody that's listening, like, yeah, dude, you should probably cut loose from there at some point. And that's a cheat code in life, not just people from Kenosha. Like, leave wherever it is you went to high school. Like, go grow up and experience the world. That's a cheat code, success. Just side note for everybody listening. And so anyway, I'm like, I don't know why she would have done that. I call her up. Hurricane Katrina happens. Long story short, I moved back out. Now, the reason I mentioned Katrina is because we had family down in Louisiana that moved up from Louisiana after the hurricane because a tree went through their house. And so this is all like 2005, moving into 2006, right? It's the end of 2005. We're moving into 2006, which is when I joined the Army. And so I went back there and I'm on the delayed entry program. And again, like, I don't even remember exactly how that happened. I just remember like it didn't matter because I wasn't going to join the Army. Like, as far as I was concerned, like, okay, whatever, sounds good. I took a little test. Nobody cares. I can still be like, hey, nope, not doing it. And that was the intent because I moved back in with my parents for a couple of weeks, helping my grandparents get situated up there. And I ended up leaving, ran around the streets for a little bit up there, found a place, like was just doing my thing. And then it was like June or July of 2006. And again, I was like a month out from this delayed entry thing. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going. It's not happening. And then my sister gets, and I don't know, like, it's always weird when I tell my story because it's not just my story. Like, there's more that was involved. Yeah, dude. And so my sister gets arrested by federal agents. And I'm like, hey, I should leave. I'm like, yo. I'm like, yo, like, looks like I'm going to the Army. And so I intended to like do a couple years and bounce. I wasn't going to stay in the Army. I had no intent to stay in the Army. I didn't want to be in the Army, but I know I needed to bounce. I needed to go because I had already been arrested for some things. I was hot. You know what I mean? Like and it just got a lot hotter. So I was like, all right, I'm going to chuck them up. And so, I left. I went to good old Fort Sill for basic training. I was an artilleryman. And it was nuts because again, I was going to do those couple of years and got out, but I went to Iraq and I was like, hey, I can play this game. You know what I mean? I re-enlisted and came back. And it was after that I went and did the whole airborne ranger, yada, yada, yada. Like, it was after all that stuff. Cause again, I had no intent to be in the Army. Like some people, they grow up their whole lives like, oh, I'm gonna be a ranger. I'm gonna be a Green Beret. I'm gonna be a SEAL. I'm gonna be like whatever they're calling MARSOC nowadays. Like, I'm gonna go do some of this high speed stuff. I never thought any of that. Like, I was the opposite. Like, I was like, yo, I'm not doing any of that stuff. But it was a good time. And it was a good time. And that's like the very condensed version. Cause even as I rack it up in my brain, like, there's so many amazing micro things that happen in those different time frames that led me to not only join the military and be successful in the military, but to continue to pursue, greater levels of success within the military.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. It's always interesting to hear the backstory because sometimes you don't really know where people come from until you ask them. So it's like, It's crazy. Like, it's crazy to think that you were out there gallivanting, being a little badass, and became a ranger, and now you are where you are today. You know,
Yeah.
father of four. So, what? So after the army, what did that look like? So, like, what? Why did you get out? Kind of, what does that look like?
Man,
Tough questions. Yeah.
I'm just like, well, it's because I share my version. You know what I mean? And like it's the honest version, but it's the condensed version. Like I like you know what I mean? Like I don't always dive into the things, but I will just in the interest of this conversation. Um, and I do want to say four with five. We got one on the way. My wife's pregnant right now, which is that in and of it, dude. That in and of itself is insane to me because I never like like I'm gonna have five kids like. And now like it's appropriate for me because I'm in a position where I like I'm a responsible father. But when I think about like where I come from and like it's just nuts. But so getting out of the military, man, I'll never forget some of these things, man. I was doing very, very good. I remember, in 2014, and I don't know how much you know about the Army, but like for senior leadership in the Army, there's like three major schools you should go to, like to get that senior enlisted whatever. And it's like Ranger School, the Master Gunners course, the Battle Staff Non-Commissioned Officer course, and if you're a paratrooper, Jump Master School. And so in 2014, I started in January. I went to the Battle Staff Non-Commissioned Officer course, graduated at the top of my class. I left and went straight to Airborne School, finished Airborne School. Then I went straight to Ranger School, went straight through Ranger School. And then like I got a Red Cross message while I was in Ranger School at the end. It was July of 2014, and I got a Red Cross message, and it was crazy because like the whole way that it played out, I knew that something was wrong because my ex-wife, she was pregnant at the time. I found out while I was in battle staff that she was pregnant with twins. It was all just wild and crazy. But here we are. I'm in Ranger School. We're in Florida phase, the last phase, and I already had my go. Like I had already been evaluated. And by the way, that was badass. Like that go in Florida, like, dude, I remember like I was fired up. So for anybody that's ever been like to the course, like it was a Mezcal, like it was like or like the mass casualty incident, and it was nuts because like I handled it like a champ. I was super like pumped up going through the whole situation. It was dope. And so anyway, the next day they call my number again. So I knew it wasn't good because they only call your number when you're going to get, hey, this is the leadership position you're going to be in, yada, yada, yada. Here's the mission. Here's the blah, op board, whatever, whatever. And so I'm like, I wonder what this is. Like I knew I had that feeling, right? That knot in my chest. And so it turns out I got a Red Cross message. My wife is having complications with the pregnancy. I went back. I made some phone calls. Again, not going to dive into all the crazy details there, but that was nuts. Just even trying to get in touch because I was stationed in Italy at the time, so it wasn't like I'm down in Georgia calling up to freaking North Carolina or pick your other stateside installation. Like I'm in Georgia and my family and everything is in Italy, and so like that was just nuts in and of itself. But I eventually got in touch with my wife and I was like, hey, what's going on? And she explained the situation. I was like, look, dude, I'm about 6 days out from graduation. I can drop everything and come home right now. She's like, no, finish. So I finished. And again, very fortunate that I went straight through because otherwise I would have missed the birth of my children. And so I graduated on July 11th of 2014 and got back home. And she got released from the hospital because when she went in for a checkup, there were complications. They kept her in the hospital. That's when I got the call. She was released like a couple days later. I get back. We go in for an appointment on Friday, and they're like, "Hey, still some issues," and they kept her there until the babies were born. The babies were due in October 14th. We had them on August 8th, and so it was a lot of stuff going on. And in Italy, like, actually, I'm gonna hold that part. I'm gonna hold that part of the story because that's not mine to tell. But there was some stuff that happened. There was some stuff that happened in that time frame. But either way. They are born on August 8th. They're in the NICU for 2 months. They get out in October, and my mom came out to visit. And it was like, I want to say October 27th. I don't remember the dates. But like my mom was there. We had just got the kids home. And like, I'm having a few beers. Like, Lindsay's in there with the kids, putting them to bed. I'm out with my mom, having a few drinks on the porch. And Lindsay's like, hey, you're being loud. You got to, like, keep either go to bed or bounce basically. And so we went to a little pub around the corner, had a few more beers, came back, and I went to bed. Now you're probably like, what does this have to do with you getting out of the Army? I'm getting there. And so like, I remember like my buddy, my best friend Ed called. He was like, hey dude, you come out, like let's go celebrate. I was like, nah, my mom's in town. We just got the kids out of the hospital. Like I'm going to bed. And so I went to bed. And the next thing I remember, and I don't tell people this, I really don't. So this is kind of nuts that I'm saying, especially on a podcast. But the next thing I know, I wake up like in my car, the carabinieri are there, and they're like, hey, like who can we call? Well, you can't call my, my ex-wife, or my wife at the time, because she's there with the kids, and my mom can't drive, and I'm like, whatever. And I was still drunk, I guess, you know what I mean? Because I don't remember. I literally don't remember, which is crazy to me because like this is a life-changing event that occurred, and I do not remember any part of it. So this year I had like made my military career. I had rocked out, done a lot of great stuff. And now this moment is what ultimately ended my military career. And so I don't remember, again, I like during that, I remember the carabinieri kind of talking to me, telling me that the MPs are on the way. I remember the MPs, I don't remember going to the installation. I remember the MPs asking me to breathe into this machine. I remember them asking me who to call. I remember telling somebody to take a left turn to get me home. Like it's bits and pieces. And then I remember waking up the next morning and I thought it was a dream. You know what I mean? And what's crazy is I didn't have a lot to drink. Honestly, like, look, I wish they would have done a drug panel because something like that had never happened before to me, and it hasn't happened since. And so in my brain, in trying to understand and justify what happened, I imagine when I went to that little pub with my mom, maybe somebody, slipped something in my drink, which wasn't abnormal in that area. But either way, that's kind of what happened. And so I ended up getting a field grade Article 15. And it was crazy because in between like from the incident and when I was read the Article 15, my commander, he was like basically telling me like, hey man, look, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? Like it's going to be good. Basically without telling me, but basically telling me that it's going to be like deferred, just keep your head clean. Cause I hadn't had any other trouble in the military. I had a very solid career. NCOERs are freaking awesome. All my 1059s are great. Like my career on paper was stupid awesome. And so the stars aligned. There was a lot of different things happening. We had a change of responsibility. The sergeant major that was outgoing, I was in Afghanistan with him, and he was like, hey, we got to get this read before the new sergeant major takes responsibility. And long story short, that didn't happen. And so I got a field grade Article 15, 45 days of restriction, 45 days of extra duty. They deducted me from staff sergeant to sergeant. And it was like, damn.
They do the book at you. Shit.
Oh, yeah, dude. Oh, yeah. And I didn't even get a DUI. I was, you know what I mean? And it was kind of nuts, man. And so either way, I did the 45-45, which was savage because my wife was recovering from an emergency C-section, raising 2 premature children at the time, and I couldn't even go home to help her. And this was in October. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year, like it was that time. It was nuts. And then after that, the imposing commander set aside the punishment on the basis of a clear injustice. So after the fact, he was like, hey, dude, what I did was wrong. It was unfounded. So we're going to give you your rank back, and you're going to get back. Everything's going to go back to normal, but you can't take back the 45-45.
Oh, shit. Yeah, you can't take back the time served. Like,
you know what I'm saying? So, like, it was ridiculous. The whole situation was ridiculous. But I was like, all right, whatever, it's done. Cool, we're good to go. I PCS from Italy, came out here to 10th Group, and I'm rocking out. Everything's good to go, man. Like, getting a lot of special qualifications, additional skills, having a good time training folks. It's solid. Everything was good. And I go to the senior leader course. And, it was interesting, too, because I was the only staff sergeant there, right? Even when we submitted the packet to go to SLC, they came back like, no, we're not taking staff sergeants right now. We're only taking sergeants first class. Because it was backed up because we had been in combat for a couple of decades. So people were missing out on their NCOESs. So you had people that were promoting that shouldn't have promoted because they didn't have that milestone. And so either way, they were like, yeah, basically, no, you're an E6. We're only taking E7. And literally like the day before I was supposed to report, I got an email saying that I got a slot in SLC. And so I go to my first, I'm like, Tim, I got to go down to Fort Sill tomorrow. And he was like, cool. I'm going to take care of the paperwork. You go get the packing list. We made it work. I drove down to Oklahoma, went through SLC as the only staff sergeant there, graduated at the top of the class, right? Like I was like number 2 out of all of us, right? And shout out to my boy, Andrew, who like knocked me off the top spot. Love this guy with all my heart. You know what I'm saying? And so anyway, I get back from SLC and they're like, the commander, and then they're like, hey, you're going to be considered for involuntary separation under QMP. And I'm like, don't even worry about that. I was like, the imposing, because it was for the Article 15, the imposing commander set it aside on the basis of a clear injustice. Don't worry about it. It has to be removed from my record. AR 27-10 tells us, and like me and the JAG officer, because at group, we have a JAG officer at battalion. So me and the JAG officer are telling these folks, like, hey, don't even worry about it, dude. Like, it's not a question of if they remove this from my record. It's a matter of when. They cannot involuntarily separate me based on this Article 15. They can't do that. And so the commander was like, we're still going to put together a solid rebuttal. So I've got like all these character references. I still got all the paperwork too. It's crazy when I stop and think about this stuff. I got all these character references from a bunch of Green Berets, Rangers, and a bunch of dudes who thinks like their statement is going to be the saving grace. Like, yeah, they're like, yo, this is the reason Sergeant Wheeler is going to still be here after the smoke clears. So it's a lot of great stuff, man. It was very humbling. I was very grateful, for some of the kind things that people had to say. And we submitted that rebuttal. This was February 16th. And so in May of 16, we get notification back that I'm going to be involuntarily separated. I got to be out on November 1st. And I'm like, yo, what? Like, I'm just blown up because I'm like, no, you can't. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? Like, are you kidding me? Like, it doesn't even make any. I'm getting looked at for Sergeant First Class for the first time, and there's no way I'm not getting promoted. I'm a Ranger. I'm a Jump Master. I got all the battle staff. I got all the things. Like, there's no. My NCOERs are like, do cream of the crop. Like, there's no freaking. What are you talking about? And so we let the QMP board know, like, hey, like, you can't do that. This non-judicial punishment is required to be removed from my record. And we literally printed out the section in the AR that tells them that, and they came back, the QMP board came back like, hey, dog, that's not our responsibility. You're going to have to tell somebody who cares. You got to be out on November 1st. And so they were like, you got to appeal to the Army Board of Correction for military records. And so we did. We submitted, a request to have that removed from my record, which, by the way, I thought just automatically happened. When the imposing commander set it aside on the basis of a clear injustice, I thought that just automatically, like Harry Potter freaking waving a wand and made it all right. But no, there's more that has to be done on our end. So we submit this packet to the ABCMR, and they're like, this is going to take about 12 months. It's going to take about, probably at least 12 months before we get some kind of clarification on whether or not we're going to remove this from your record. And so I'm like, I don't have 12 months. And so the QMP board was like, yeah, we don't even care. The ABCMR is like, we got to run through our processes. And fortunately, there was an exception to policy that could be made. We had to submit every, it was 30 or 60 days. I was talking to the colonel on a regular basis. Had to be your first 06 in your command, had to sign an exception to policy request to extend this QMP separation. And so I'm submitting them all the time. I'm still doing the things. I'm rocking out, dude. I'm instructing the Special Forces basic combat course for support elements. You know what I mean? I'm freaking, pulling jump master duties. We're doing all the cool stuff, man. It's all great. Things are going on. We're every 60 days or whatever it was, I'm submitting a new packet, for this exception to policy. Everything's fine and dandy until February 27th of 2017. I get notification that I did not provide enough evidence that it was unjust, even though we had the imposing commander do an additional addendum, and we had everybody in their we submitted it all. But they were like, hey, you didn't provide enough evidence that it was unjust. And side note on that, because for those of you, obviously, I feel like we're going to be a lot of people listening to the military. It's kind of insane because the commander, they have all types of stupid authority. They can do whatever the hell they want for the most part. But you mean to tell me that when the commander comes in and is like, hey, I did something wrong, it's not as easy to fix a wrong? Just a side note. It's just a thought that I had right here. So anyway, we submitted all that, and I had to be out on March 1st. So I had 3 days to get out of the Army. And that was nuts because I submitted another request to the Q&P board. I was like, hey, dude, like, can I get another 30 days so I can just kind of final things out and get out? It's like, nah, dude, you've been knowing this is coming. Yeah, but I didn't expect this outcome. Like, because of what it says in Army regulation. And so, whatever. Fortunately, I was dating a chick from CIF at the time. You know what I mean? Which was like, for those of you who've been in the military, you know that's one of the hardest things to clear. But that it was like a blessing. It was like the stars aligned for me to get out. They aligned for me to get screwed in the first place, and then they aligned for me to make this thing happen as it did. And so anyway, I had 3 days to get out of the Army, got out of the Army, and spent about 6 months in a bottle of whiskey. Now, it was kind of nuts because like I didn't know what I was going to do getting out. I had no idea. And I just got divorced, by the way. I got divorced like right before that. And so like at the same time, like these two things that we fight for most of us, most men, and I hope that doesn't come across the wrong way, most men with families, like we live to create our family and then the means by which we provide for them. And so like both of these things are coming apart at the same time. Both of them. It was tough, dude. It was tough. And I had 50-50 custody. So while I had my kids, I wasn't really drinking. But when I didn't have my kids, dude, I was drunk. Like I'm talking about, I was just like, dude, me and whiskey were best friends at this time. And it was about 6 months, I think. I don't know. I didn't do the math. But like for a while there, I'm just getting drunk and like feeling sorry for myself and not knowing like what's next. I didn't know. And like, even when I think about it now, like I'm not even going through the motions. Like I was literally like, when I had my kids, dude, I was taking care of them. I didn't drink. I was being a good dad, trying not to let it affect like what I was dealing with go affect them. But when I didn't have them, dude, like, and there are a few friends that I have, you know, who aren't really friends anymore, who knew me in that time frame, and they saw it, dude. It was very destructive, self-destructive, and man, if it wasn't for those kids, I don't know if I'd still be here. You know what I mean?
So how'd you go from probably what sounds like a very low point in your life to the polar opposite right now? So what led you from that moment to really like get your shit together?
Yeah, dude, the short answer is God. You know what I'm saying? Which I would have never imagined me coming to that conclusion. But like that's a real thing. But you know, after that 6 months or so, I was like, yeah, I got to start making money. And so I just went back to Afghanistan because there's always room for somebody like me downrange. And so I went back downrange for a little bit and came back stateside and like I just realized I got to start playing the game. I got to start playing to win. You know, I got to do what I've always done, just it's a different flavor now. And also, like I said, my kids, dude, I had a responsibility to these young people to like, I have to be a good father. Like I have to. Like this is like, for the same reasons that I said I wasn't going to join the military in the first place, like that same resentment was like, yo, dude, you've got to be what you got to be. Like you got to be a good dad. And so I came back stateside and I remember I was actually at the park with the kids. And I've been dropping applications because I knew I didn't want to go back down range with the folks that I was with. It was an awkward, like, I'm not going to dive in all that, but I knew like not my flavor, not my people, didn't come from my community. All wish they would have, but didn't. And so it's just weird.
Yeah, I'm familiar,
yeah. Like it, and I didn't want to go back to that. So I was dropping applications left and right. And I remember I was at the park. I was back again stateside. I was at the park with the kids. We were playing. We were running around. I get a phone call, and this dude's like, "Hey, we think we found a job for you. You know, come in for an interview." And I thought it was somebody that I had talked to before because the way that he said it, I was like, "Oh yeah." I thought I knew which one it was. Turns out, no freaking clue. I never met, talked to, applied for it, none of that. I didn't even know what this was. But I go in and I talk to these folks, and I get picked up, and I accept the job offer. To work, you know, training our military in preparation for a near-peer conflict, specifically the Army. Like I started with the Army, and there's so much I want to dive into about that experience, but I don't because that's not what this is about. Like I don't frequently dive back, and so when I do, it like it's just this pontification of memory. You know what I mean? And so I remember sitting in there for the interview too. Side note for everybody that like is getting out and not going to be an entrepreneur. Like advocate for yourself when you're in an interview. Like nobody else is going to advocate for you. So don't be scared to be like, yeah, like to ask for more money. Don't be scared to advocate for you. because nobody else is doing that. Like the people who are hiring you are trying to pay you less than what you're worth. So you've got to be the advocate for yourself. So anyway, and I learned that through these processes. And so anyway, I'm in there. I remember the interview. It was cool. And it was funny too, because I was like, hey, is it a problem if I cuss? Because I used to cuss a whole lot. And they're like, no, I swear to you, within 2 weeks of my starting, we had like a staff meeting. And they were like, hey, we can't cuss anymore. I'm like but I went and I did that job for a while. And this is the beginning, I guess, to answer where I'm going with the answer to your question. This is the beginning of me picking me up, because now I'm back to being responsible. Like now I actually have to wake up. I have to get back into good habits, healthy routines. I have to actually start being an adult. And it was good. Like these stepping stones were great. I have different issues with different people in different times, but at the end of the day, I should say I used to, because I don't anymore. Because like, even though there were micro conflicts, all of these things led me to where I am in development of who I am and the habits that I had that got me here. And that's all that was. It was a stepping stone. And it was great. And then I went and did something similar for the Navy, right? Which was super weird, because like, I don't know why anybody would ever join the Navy. Like I'm not a big dude. And those berthings are teeny tiny. Like I can't even like roll over. Like it's crazy. But it was cool because like I did, again, something similar there. It was an awesome experience. Loved the time that I spent out there. It was absolutely amazing being underway. And then I got asked to develop and facilitate the senior leader courses for the Space Force, which is another crazy thing, because like, as you see, it's like these different steps of just like, hey, what am I going to be when I grow up? And I landed in this space of like government contracting and service in that space because that's what I had done for my entire adult life. And I didn't think about like, what do I actually want? And so even now, like when I'm coaching or talking to or whatever, veterans and transitioning service members, I always like, I'm like, hey dude, what actually makes you happy? What do you want to do? Because I'll ask them what's their plan getting out. And a lot of the times it is just going back to what it is they've done. And the question is, are you doing that because it's what you've done and it's easy, it's the path of least resistance? Or are you doing that because it's what you enjoy? Because that is essential, that you find, hey, what actually brings me joy? And even as I'm talking about this stuff now, like this is so essential for our people, because like that suicide rate, as far as I'm tracking, it's not going down. Like we're still knocking ourselves off at stupid rates. And I think a lot of that is because we aren't looking into what brings us joy. We're just like, hey, dude, I'm gonna check this box. I got to do what I got to do to make the things happen. And so we don't find joy. We don't find peace. We don't find happiness. We don't dedicate our lives to that which motivates us. And you can. And so anyway, so now like I'm over here working with some people like at the ground floor of the newest branch of our military. And so mind you, even as I'm talking about this stuff right now, young dumbass kid who leaves home at 14 years old, now helping establish the newest branch of our military. Like it's nuts, dude. And we got those programs off the ground, and I went to work at the combatant command in the J35 writing the campaign order, just outlining to the branches of the military how we're going to execute the national strategy. And so again, very unique position, very awesome opportunity. I had great times in all of these different jobs and stuff that I'm talking about. It was great. But how did I learn like financial services? Well, while I was in the Army, I was saving in a thrift savings plan. And I was losing money. And I'm like, yo, if this is what's supposed to sustain me for the last third of my life while I'm not working, I got to figure out a better way. And so I went and talked to some financial professionals, and I learned about strategies for cash accumulation and asset protection that I was unfamiliar with. Why was I unfamiliar? Because nobody teaches financial education in the United States. Like, not happening. It doesn't happen in high school. I got people on my team right now with masters in finance and economics that are learning from me. I do not have a master's in finance or economics. And they're learning things about financial strategy, financial well-being. They're learning things about leveraging the Internal Revenue Code because they're not teaching it anywhere else. And so anyway, at the time, I'm like, yo, this stuff, it sounds too good to be true, but also too good to pass up. So I start saving for me and my kids, fast forward about 6 years, and I realized the significance and legitimacy of what I'm doing. And so it was at that time that I was like, man, I'm gonna get licensed, and I'm gonna start helping my friends and family. And I'm gonna learn. I'm gonna learn all the things to teach all the things so that we can actually do better. And so I did. And again, I had no intent to change my career. I was already making what I thought was really good money. I was making 6 figures. And look, as an enlisted soldier coming out, like, yeah, dude, making a healthy 6 figures, it's not bad. We think that's good money. It's just heads up. It's not. It's not.
Yeah. That's all right. Yeah.
Like, it's not in this economy. And and it depends, variety of factors. But either way, I realized that wealth mindset would keep me in that position. And I've got bigger goals, and there's things that I want to do. There's impacts that I want to have. And I know that in order to do that, I need to be in a better position financially. Put your mask on first before you you know what I'm saying? And so anyway, I started navigating this space, helping friends and family, outpacing my salary, finding passion and learning and sharing these things. And that's what led to me ultimately. I was working with Deloitte. That was the last job I had. I was a senior consultant with one of the largest, most prestigious firms on the planet. And it was a tough call because like I've been dabbling in this space of financial services for a very short amount of time, but again, had identified the fact that it's something I was passionate about. And so like, I'm in this dream job. Like a lot of people would kill to work at Deloitte. It's a great company. I love Deloitte. I would like none of the companies that I've ever worked for. I don't have anything bad to say about them, but it was especially hard leaving Deloitte because I really appreciated the team. I appreciated the culture. I appreciated the way they poured into us. They were all about leadership development. They wanted to build and develop leaders. And I love that. You know what I mean? And so it was a tough decision, but I knew that I needed to go pursue, my passion. And I remember because it was like January of 2023. And I was like, I went to them. I was like, hey guys, I need to quit. I need to put in my 2 weeks or whatever. And they're like, hey, the contract is up for recompete. Can you leave and, can you wait till that's done? And it was in March. And I was like, okay, you know what I mean? Because again, I didn't want to burn any bridges. Plus I really loved and respect these people. And so it's like, yeah, dude. And so I remember Daniela was pregnant at the time with our fourth child. And come March, she's 7 months pregnant. Now Deloitte gives 16 weeks of paid family time. So 4 months of paid family time. And so I could have taken 2 on the front, 2 on the back of the birth, and then cut loose. But in my brain, like, that's unethical. That's not okay. Like, I can't do that. I can't, like, put in for family time and then leave on the back end. So I quit. When Daniela was 7 months pregnant, I left for a career that's entirely dependent upon, like, me. And it was the best professional decision I ever made in my life. And it's crazy when I stop to think about it because, like, that's a jump that most people won't take, and that's why a lot of people won't. That's why a lot of people will stay in their box. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they stay. I wouldn't say unhappy, but they stay comfortable.
Right.
And being a little uncomfortable, but for higher risk, high reward, it definitely scares folks. I mean, it scared the shit out of me. I kept my 9 to 5 and grew my business until I felt it was time to actually transition over because I was scared. So let's talk a little bit about the finance aspect because I know that I've reached out to you to work on my finances as well, which is something we need to address after this call. But, what does that look like? So, let's say I'm still active duty and I realize that TSP is trash and so are most IRAs. But, depending on how they're managed, but I want to do something better for my future and for my family. Kind of give me an idea of what that looks like. And I know it's going to be unique for everybody, but just give me an idea of why you do that and what's the benefit of that?
Yeah, no, well, the benefit off top, that's an easy one. We don't know what we don't know. See, like we all graduate high school, enter into the workforce, have no idea what to do with our money. So we go talk to a bank. Maybe, right? We set up a bank account, which is a financial product. And so like we put our money in the bank account and we have to get a job to earn that money. And then we start saving in an employee sponsored 401k and nobody starts having that conversation about like, what is this? How is my money growing? Where is my money growing? When can I access these monies? What are the tax consideration with these funds? Like, how can I transfer these funds? What's the transferability look like? Like nobody's talking about any of these things. Like at all. And so first and foremost, like the most important component there is like, we don't know what we don't know. And so that's the case. That's the situation that most of us fall into. And now we're saving in this vehicle that we can't touch till we're 59 and a half without a tax penalty. And if we don't touch it by like 73, then there'll be a 25% excise tax placed on top of it and it'll be taxed as income. Like there's all these things that we don't even know about. And who knows, especially if you're starting out, you know what I mean? Because look, if you're younger, if you're 18, whatever, you're starting your life, your adult life, the earlier you start saving, the better. The two biggest factors as far as wealth generation is concerned is how much you're saving and how long you have to save. So what does it look like and why? Well, start talking to a professional who knows some things. Start talking to somebody who's going to focus on educating you. Somebody who's going to actually just share like facts. Because a lot of us don't have time to study and dig into the facts. See, we each have different professions. Like we each do what it is we do professionally, and we don't have time to step out of our lane because the economy sucks. And we got to be great at what it is we're doing, because if we're too far divided, then we're not going to be great at any one thing. And so unless you're in financial services, you should probably be working with a professional. And let me tell you something. I am in financial services, and I still work with a professional. You know what I mean? And so like, and it's one of my partners, it's one of my peers, but I have that outside eye looking in, because sometimes, and we all know this in different areas of life, sometimes the blinders are on right in front of us. Sometimes we can't see in the midst of where we're at and what we're doing, we can't see maybe a micro problem that could be fixed. And that's the thing. When I sit down with somebody, we start with an analysis. We got to look at the big picture, because look, every part of your financial portfolio can either complement or contradict each other. And we just want to make sure that it's all moving in the right direction. So we look at money coming in, money going out. We look at assets, all assets. We look at whether or not there's life insurance. I've never seen a healthy financial portfolio that does not include independent life insurance. We look at debts and liabilities, and how are we going to fix that? How are we going to take care of those situations most effectively? And then we look at like, hey, how are we going to preserve this? What are we going to do to preserve our wealth? Because a lot of people, they think like trusts are for rich people. I'll tell you what, man, I paid like $1,000 for a trust. I used to spend more than that with a bunch of paratroopers getting drunk in a bar in Italy on a weekend. That was the best $1,000 I spent in my life. And now my assets will avoid the probate process. And now the things, the empire that I work to build, all the things that I do during my working life, they will be inherited by my family appropriately. And so it is, you start with an analysis and you look at the big picture. What's going on? And you identify, hey, where are we spending in excess? Do we have an emergency fund? Are our assets working together? How am I leveraging the different ways that money grows with the different ways that we're taxed on that growth? Because look, guys, newsflash for you, taxes are going up. At this point, they don't have a choice but to go up. Like there was a time where it could be like, hey, you know, it depends on who gets elected and this, that, and the other. And don't get me wrong, right now, there are some great things happening as far as identifying excess spending within the government. However, we are $36 trillion in debt. And I want to paint a picture for you, because it took 242 years to get to $20 trillion in debt as a nation. And then in 6, we almost doubled and made it to 36 trillion. When you look at the state of the economy, taxes have no choice but to go up. So it's essential that we understand, when are we paying taxes? And what are we paying taxes on? Are we paying taxes on our income and on the gains? Are we deferring and paying taxes on contributions as well as the gains? Or are we only paying taxes up front from our income? Like, we've got to consider these things so that we can find ourselves in the best position when we look to start that process of living. You know what I mean? Like when we want to retire and actually be in that position where we can experience life with, again, without being beholden to somebody else. And so that's for me, when I sit down with anybody, or and regardless of whether it's me, what I would recommend for anybody is sit down with somebody who knows a little bit about these things, so that you can learn about what you can do most effectively for you. Now, some resources require licenses, right? Some resources in this country, some financial products and vehicles require you to work with somebody who is licensed in that space so that they can adequately give access to those resources. And so when you work with somebody, I would encourage you, again, find somebody who's focused on education, find somebody who's not limited in scope, and find somebody who has the licenses necessary to help you do what you want to do. And then from there, do it. Because a plan, what is a plan if you're not actually sticking to it? And so many people, they won't. So many people, they're too focused on the now. And here's the thing about like wealth strategy. You've got to have enough to like live for the now, take care of your responsibilities, live in the now, have fun and enjoy life and doing what you can while you're here. But also having that healthy amount to where you can live in the future. But we live in a consumer society. So most people aren't thinking about the future. And this is why every week, almost every day, I'm sitting down with older people who are looking, they're at that stage where they want to retire and they're realizing like, hey, they didn't position themselves effectively to do that. And so now we're jumping through hoops trying to maneuver situations and stretch things out to get them there. And are there resources that we can use for that? Absolutely. But the best thing somebody can do is have an efficient plan put in place as soon as possible. And so just like you said, like I can't sit here and necessarily give advice because every situation is going to be different. But the advice that I can and that I can give and anybody should adhere to is start talking to a professional. And there's different professionals. You got people who charge for advice. You got people who are going to charge you $4,000 to $8,000 just to tell you some things that I could tell you for free or that somebody else can tell you for free. Then you got people who are going to charge you to have your assets under management. Then you got people who are going to work with folks who are going to get paid by the companies that they partner with. Guys, none of them is necessarily wrong, but I would encourage you to work with somebody who's independent and non-captive, meaning they don't work just for a company, but they have access to a broad spectrum of resources that they can actually go and find what's going to be best for you. Because here's the thing. A lot of people think like if you're just working with Charles Schwab, it's the same as working with an Edward Jones. Or if you're working with Merrill Lynch, it's the same as working with an Allstate rep or whatever it may be. But these companies are limited to their products and services. And so if your professional is captive to an organization, they don't have scope to look outside of that. Now, again, that doesn't mean wrong. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. But these are the things that I've learned over the years and the things that I take into consideration. Because even with me, when I sit down with a client, I'm not pulling in one component from one company. Like we'll have one thing from one company, the best company for that thing. And then we'll look at another company for the best company for that, and so on and so forth. Like we're going to find the best pieces and pull them all together to make sure that everything is working in unison and most effectively towards the desired end. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, it did. I think for me, so early on when I was putting money in a TSP, it was like the first time I actually saved money. So, I didn't have money. All of a sudden you get like this steady paycheck going to the military. I turned 21, I drank half my paycheck, and then I realized that I needed to start saving. Yeah. You see that TSP grow and you think it's phenomenal, and everybody's in the G fund and you're like, this is great. And then you realize like, it's kind of growing slow. You learn a little bit more and you start to look into it. And like, I've rolled my TSP over. I went government contracting also when I got out. So I rolled it over into like the ADP, like whatever 401k they had for me. Yeah. And then I went federal employee and I rolled it back into like the civilian TSP. And I'm like, all of these suck. Like I'm just rolling over like 150k, and it could have been so much more than that if you'd like diversify your portfolio a little bit. And for me, it wasn't until I actually sat down and talked to you that I was like, oh, I should probably talk to like a professional. Because I had like my uncle like helping me out who was in finance, but he was again captive. He was working for one particular organization, so he was only familiar with their tools and their best products. So I think it's important, like, even if you're not sure, and even if you aren't the most well-versed in finance, that you sit down and talk to somebody. So if folks wanted to get a hold of you, if they were like, I'm going to talk to Nathan. Nathan's a veteran. He understands, my pain points. He understands TSP. How would folks get a hold of you if they wanted to work with you? Yeah.
So on all the social media platforms, my handle is Nathan U. Wheeler. And then www.nathanuwheeler.com. My email is wealth@nathanuwheeler.com. And any one of those ways, like you can just reach out and connect, and ask questions. And like, by all means, friend me send me a message. Like, cause that's the thing too. I get a lot of friend requests on all these different platforms. And like, if I don't know you, I'm still trying to get over like the military, like the OPSEC side of me. Like, so if I don't know you, I'm like, yeah, dude, sorry. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless there's a message that comes along with the friend request where it's like, hey, I'm so-and-so, you know what I mean? I'm just looking for some guidance here. And I don't charge for that, by the way. And like, cause I think it's necessary for us to at least have a foundation to start with. Like, how do we actually how do we actually solve this problem and fix the broken backbone of this country? And it does start with education. And so, yeah, that's, and please, like, never hesitate to reach out. You know, I've got a team of about 135 associates across the country. You know, if I can't help you personally, you know, one of them can. And that's the goal. Like, we always start with education. People need to understand how money works and how they can get their money to work for them. They got to understand how money grows and how we're taxed on that growth. Like, these are essential components. And here's the other thing. It's like, if your money is growing for you, you are paying for something. So what are you paying for and how much are you paying? Like, these are all things that we should know and be familiar with, but we are not. We just are not, because it's not taught to us. Again, I remember sitting in basic training or like reception, like in the beginning of my military career, and somebody was like, oh yeah, if you save $200 a paycheck in your TSP, you'll have $1 million when you retire in 20 years. And let me tell you something. There have never been market circumstances in the history of this country under which that statement is an accurate statement.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah. 100%, unless you're lucky. But no, 100%. And I think that, like, I always tell people, like, I have a doctorate in business, and obviously my specialization is Homeland Security, but from an economic standpoint, as it relates to national security, I learned how to run the country. I learned how to run other people's businesses. I never learned how to run my own business. I never learned how to manage my own finances. Same thing with most finance degrees and finance management, like macro and microeconomics. You learn how to do something for someone else. Again, that consumerism. You don't learn how to establish independent wealth. You have to actually go out and seek that and then get a license, like you're saying, and then be able to teach that. But for someone like me, it's like, now you have to go find the teacher. And that, for me, that teacher was you, to realize that, like, hey, you did some good stuff, but you could do some better stuff. So no, that's phenomenal. I have a question. I don't know if you want to comment on this, but I know a lot of my military friends, they have also gone into the finance world, but specifically stock markets and crypto. They are so set that is going to be the gateway to wealth. Now, I'm not saying that's entirely wrong. I'm a big fan of diversifying financial portfolios, but what would you say to that, to everybody out there who thinks they're going to win it big on crypto, which no one ever has that I'm aware of, but, you know.
You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Like, just look at the ratios. Look at the percentage of people who are actually putting their money there and the percentage of people who are actually extremely wealthy doing that. And let me tell you, like, making 20 grand is not, I mean, that's not extreme wealth. That may be good to put a Band-Aid over something, but that's not a long-term solution. And I know a few people who have made like 20 grand on cryptocurrency or whatever. But like, here's what I would say to that. Like, whether it's stock market or cryptocurrency, just like you said, diversification. You should have that is higher risk and it's variable. So there's 3 ways that money grows. Let's talk about it real quick. In a fixed account, you're getting a fixed rate of return, usually between 3 and 5%. Here, your money's very safe, right? It doesn't fluctuate a whole lot. The downside is you're typically getting pretty low rates of return. So you're not outpacing inflation. Then you have your variable accounts. And here's where we're betting on the success or failure of a company, right? Whether that's like 401ks, IRAs, stocks, cryptocurrencies, mutual funds, whatever it is, it's variable. And so there are years where you can do really good. And there are years where you're going to lose some money. And when you lose the money, you're disrupting the compounding process, right? Because compound interest, man, I now I want to dive into compound interest, but I don't want to derail from where I'm at. But like, when you disrupt the compounding process, now you have a period of time that you have to spend rebuilding to get back to where you were. Because if you have $100,000 and then you lose 10%, like, you've got to spend time to get back up to $100,000. And that's time that could be working, your money could be working for you elsewhere, right? And so that's your variable accounts. And then you have your index strategies. And your index strategies allow you to realize gains based off the performance of an index without your money actually being in the index. So you are compounding interest, right? When the index goes up 10%, you're going to make 10%. When the index goes down 10%, you're locked in. You're not going to make net money in the negative years, but you're not going to lose any money either, right? So you don't spend that period of time rebuilding. Instead, when the market corrects itself, you just continue to grow from the position you were in prior to the depreciation. So those are like the 3 ways that money grows. And then again, there's 3 ways that we're taxed on that growth that I went over earlier. And so a healthy portfolio will mix and match the ways that money grows with the way that we're taxed on that growth, so you can capitalize on the strengths and healthy components of each. And you can spread out the length of your money and how long it will be able to sustain. You know what I mean? Like, and I hope that makes sense. Even as I'm sitting here talking about it, it's like I'm like running through diagrams in my brain, and I really just want to like pull it up and show people, because it's a thing. Every part should complement each other. Even if you have like a tax deferred variable strategy, there's a space where that should absolutely complement a tax advantaged index strategy, where they should be working together to let your money last longer. So it's just a lot of things to consider. So for anybody, like if you're putting your money in the stocks and crypto, sure, that sounds great. I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket, especially that basket, because I know a whole lot more people who lost a lot of money than I know who actually gained a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, I try to tell people this because a lot of people know that I made money in my early years with investments in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And that was just advice from my grandmother, who thought that like anything paper was going to go away and to invest into the future and digital world. And I listened to her, but I have not invested in cryptocurrency since 2009.
Yeah.
And I just, I hear, like, I don't know if you ever heard of the CoffeeZilla podcast, but he is a cryptocurrency private journalist, investigator. He's an investigative journalist. And all you hear him talk about is like the Haktua coin, like the Jake Paul issue, just rug pulls left and right, people being screwed over. Or I heard an example, a friend of mine was talking to me about somebody that she knows that invested a ton of money into cryptocurrency, made a ton of money, but when he went to go pull his money out to actually realize those gains, there was like all these random fees and more money he had to actually put into it, and he didn't have the money to put in to get his money out, so he lost all of his gains. There was like some loophole. It was a rug pull. To me, it's just all fancy ways of saying rug pulls. And I'm like, I could never imagine putting all of my money into something that volatile and expecting to be able to retire in 30 years.
And crypto's an unregulated market.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so same. Like I know people like me personally. I had some pretty good gains on cryptocurrency. It's several years ago. It was actually really good, and I went to go get the money out, and I couldn't. And so there's different scenarios, but at the end of the day, I mean, whether we're talking about crypto, the stock market, or anything else, at the end of the day, a healthy financial portfolio has some diversification. Now, I don't like to gamble or bet, and that's all we're doing when we're betting on crypto or stocks or whatever. Like we're just betting, and so like I don't do a whole lot of that. I'm much more particular about what I do with my money now. But that doesn't mean that there's not a time and a place for some of that stuff. And again, you've got to factor in the capital gains tax. You know what I mean? Like you got to factor in what you're going to pay on taxes when you start pulling that money out and things of that nature. So again, I don't like to sit here and give any type of advice, because every single person's situation is different. And your strategy should be unique to you. It should be in alignment with where you are, the goals that you have, where you want to be, and all these things. Like, and if somebody's not taking that approach, if somebody is looking at a blanket approach, I would recommend that you seek advice, holler at somebody else, get a few opinions, right? Because again, a healthy financial portfolio will have diversification, and a healthy financial professional will be sharing with you, what components you should add to your portfolio. Because and even as I'm sitting here, and I'm sorry, my brain's dancing around so many different things, but I'll say this, like my approach when I sit down with anybody during that analysis phase, like, if anything that we have in place is working, it's going to stay in place. I don't look to like replace any financial advisor. By all means, like work with that person and let them do what they're doing, as long as what they're doing is working for you. Anything that's not working, we're going to get it replaced. And anything that you don't have in your portfolio that you should, we're going to help you understand what that is and exactly why, and break down again, what is it you're getting and how much are you paying for? Because a lot of people don't know, even your IRAs, like all these different things, you're paying at least a percent of your accumulated value. So you've got to factor in, okay, if I'm paying 1% of my entire accumulated value, what am I paying for? What is the value that I'm getting out of that?
No, 100%. I think that's really good advice, though. It's if you have all your eggs in one basket, then maybe talk to somebody to see if you can switch it up, or maybe if that's the right strategy for you, then ball out. But I know that for me, I'm constantly trying to learn the best way because I'm retiring at 40. I can retire now, but I am not doing a single fucking thing that I don't want to do in the next few years. So
Yeah.
understanding how this works and understanding how I can make my money work for me even more so than it has in the next decade is incredibly important. So, no, I think that's awesome. I will leave a link to all of your social media and your website, and I'll leave your email in the video description. But before we close out, is there anything else you want to say, or anything you want to say to our listeners who are mostly veterans?
Yeah, dude, especially for anybody who's stuck through, because like like I was not expecting some of those conversations up front. But here's the thing, man. There's a lot of things that I could say, but here's the thing. All of us, especially us, especially our people, you know what I'm saying? Like coming out of the military or whatever it is, like we're trying to figure out like what it is we're going to do. Like who are we going to be? And what I've learned over the years is like, you've got to shape your identity around where you're going. I see a lot of people get out of the military and they stay stuck with where they were. They let all that define them. And that's an easy thing to fall into. But in most cases, where you are is not where you want to be. And so you've got to figure out a way to not only identify where it is you want to be, but how to shape your identity around that and how to live into that. Because obviously it's going to require new associations. It's going to require new habits. It's going to require new affirmations, and it's going to require a faith in something greater than yourself. And so that's something that I know for me when I got out of the military that I struggled with was how do I disassociate? Because when I was in, like your tabs, your badges, the things that you've done, that like defines who you are. And it's like all that stuff is made up. It's not even real when you get out of the military. So it's like, how do I become who I need to be? And so it was a huge challenge for me, that transition. But it's one that you can absolutely do as long as, again, those associations, habits, affirmations, the faith that you have, as long as these things are in alignment with where you want to go, like you can do it. And I mean, I could talk about that stuff all day, but that's what I would leave anybody with, man. Make sure that you're not living, in a version of yourself that isn't conducive with the version that you want to become.
No, I think that's great. I think with that, I'll just say thank you for being here. Thank you for coming on the podcast. I think you provided a ton of value, and hopefully my listeners, whether they're military or not, who are planning for the future, or maybe they're thinking about planning for the future, that they reach out.